everyone, and welcome to History and Systems of Psychology. We are on week 11. Hooray, right? Nearing the end of the semester. We have a lot to do. I'm excited to be with you today. I want to start by mentioning just a couple of things. So I posted exam grades. I can't give live feedback on TV in terms of the answers, of course, but I'm happy to meet with any of you if you would like to go over your exam. So please let me know. We can set up an appointment either face-to-face or via Zoom. The second thing is, we'll be talking about this toward the end of class, is you're going to be doing a photo voice project. And what you're going to do is you're going to select some of the people that we've covered in class, and you're going to take a photo that represents one of their big ideas, okay? And what you'll do is, and I have instructions and announcements, but what you'll do is you will describe what that thing is and then why you took the specific photo you took to represent it, okay? I think it'll be a relatively fun assignment, different than an exam, which for many of us, we might be like, yeah, I need a break from the exams. Yeah, and then the other thing that we are going to talk about today is social psychology. I have a little This Day in History slide I'd like to share with you, because several of the items go with what we've covered in class. In 1940, Florence was born. The Connecticut Retreat for the Insane opened at Hartford for the reception of patients. The institution's name has changed several times, but was called the Hartford Retreat for many years. It is now the Institute of Living. I thought that was interesting. And then also talking about mental health, in 1843, the first magazine for mental patients, the Illuminator, not to be confused with the Illuminati, okay, began publication at the Pennsylvania Hospital in Philadelphia. And we're going to be talking about Mesmer today, so this is particularly timely, as it were. In 1901, the London Psychotherapeutic Society was inaugurated. The society was dedicated to the study of mesmerism, hypnotism, and other psychic phenomena, and their adaptation to the cure and prevention of disease. So some interesting things going on back in the late 1700s through the early 1900s. Today's April 1st, so happy April Fool's Day to you. I don't know if you've given or received an April Fool's joke, but in honor of this class, I made two up. So here we go. We can have, like, if someone wants to do a cymbal crash or a ba-dum-bum after both of these, feel free. Okay, so April Fool's jokes. So I would say to Helmholtz, your frogs went on strike. They're at dinner with Kermit and Miss Piggy right now. Not great. I like this one a little bit. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. The other one, I'm talking to Darwin. While you were on the party boat, the beagle left the port. So there you go. All right, so I want to talk about who we covered last week. What do you remember? I'm going to write some of those items on the board. So this takes us back to Tuesday, right? Because I was at a conference on Thursday.
We talked a lot about behaviorism overall.
Does anyone remember some of the names associated with behaviorism that we discussed? Thorndike, yeah, and he's actually not in the behaviorism chapter, but just a little bit before the behaviorism chapter. He sort of bridges the gap between what was going on and then the influence of behaviorism. Thorndike, good. Who else? Someone else. Excellent. Yes. Starts with an S. Then there's a K. All right, Skinner's going to be that person. All right. Let's talk a little bit about Pavlov. When it comes to behaviorism, a lot of times it's Pavlov or Watson that people will talk about first. Did Pavlov set out to be a psychologist? No, he did not. What was he studying? And what did he win a Nobel Prize for? He worked with dogs and he studied what?
Was it the digestive tract?
He studied the digestive tract. Sounds thrilling, right? So that was what he was interested in. And along the way, he just happened to find that when prior to dogs receiving food, they would salivate, some of them profusely, right? It kind of depends on the dog that you have. Knowing that soon they were going to be able to eat that, okay? So their taste buds got going, they started salivating. And Pavlov probably wasn't the first person to notice this, but he thought, let's see what I can do with that. Is there a way I can elicit the response by pairing the food with a stimulus? He paired the food with what? With a bell, okay? So this is how it worked. The bell would sound, there would be the presentation of food, and then the dog at some point would be allowed to eat, all right? This pairing continued for a while, okay? We're not talking about a human, we're talking about a dog, so it takes a little bit longer. Over time, however, with continued repetitions, Pavlov was able to take away the food and found that the sound of a bell would make the dog do what? Yeah, exactly. So that was something that he contributed to behaviorism that really changed the landscape of psychology, at least for a time. And we're still influenced by behaviorism today. That was really a hot topic in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. A lot of behaviorists experimented on animals and would use comparative psychology, meaning they would do something to see how animals reacted, and then they would see do humans respond likewise. And to a great extent with some of these simple things like the conditioned and unconditioned stimulus that rang true, no pun intended. So, because, Pavlov, all right. Through with the jokes, I guess. Okay. We also briefly talked about some members who were in our previous chapter alongside Thorndike. Some of the people that may not be like the people we immediately think of when we think of psychology, but did great things in their respective fields. There's someone who came up with the paired associations technique. Yeah, Mary Calkins, and she really excelled in her field, right? Completed all the requirements for a PhD at Harvard, but was never awarded that PhD. A couple of others that are well known in their respective fields or branches of psychology. Good, good. And what study did they conduct?
Didn't they do the doll test?
They did, yeah. Do you or someone else want to describe what that test was?
The doll test is when they would have African American and white children pick between African American or white dolls.
Yes.
And what they thought each doll, like they would ask them questions like, which one do you think is nicer? Which one do you think is better? And at the end, they would ask them which one looks more like you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would force them to pick like between.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And usually the African American children and white children would both pick the white dolls.
Yeah, which was really interesting, right? This particular research study was used in the Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka landmark case, all right? And alongside the use in that case, it was actually the first use of psychological research in a court case. That makes it important on various levels, right? Something in my mouth. Francis Sumner. Why did we talk about him, or what is his legacy?
First African American to receive a PhD in psychology.
Yes.
One of the things I have noted down is that he kind of debunked racist bias and intelligence shown in different races.
Yes, yes. And he was a psychologist at Howard University, correct? Do you remember his dissertation, the name of his dissertation?
Psychoanalysis of Freud and Adler.
Yeah, Psychoanalysis of Freud and Adler. He was known later in his practice, his research examined the psychology of religion, which I found interesting. So that's probably what he was interested in from a very young age, but given you're working with a faculty member when you're working on your dissertation, you usually don't have just free reign of doing whatever you want. So he became well known later as a scholar in the field of religion and psychology and looking at the two in conjunction with one another. Anyone else that is important to mention from that chapter? Okay, all right. We're going to come back a little bit more to behaviorism on Thursday. What I want to do right now is talk about social psychology. All right. And that is a mesmerized cat, isn't it? Do any of you have cats who jump on your computer, on your laptop immediately when you need to be working? Mm-hmm. Like when you're writing a paper and all of a sudden it is GKLZZZR. When you hear the term social psychology, what, if anything, comes to mind?
I'm just kind of thinking of like how people socially interact with one another.
Right, and what might influence those interactions? Good. Someone else.
I'm in social psychology right now.
Wonderful.
About first impressions.
Mm-hmm. Good. First impressions. They're pretty powerful, right? And they're not always accurate.
No.
Okay. Other things. Is that it? Everyone with me?
And I also think of like social scenarios and social norms to that. So it's like if you think a certain way because of like how you were raised or what environment you're in.
Social norms and mores, we'll put that in there too. I was thinking about this on my way over in terms of a social psychology perspective. I went to the research conference on Thursday and I took my mom with me to Little Rock, Arkansas, and that was her first trip out of state since she fell and broke her hip. And so it was so good to see her out there, and we walked and did things, and that was really neat. Well, she has this temporary handicap parking sticker, okay? The permanent ones, I guess, are blue. She has a red one, and it's like punched like the holes when she can't use it anymore. So I think it's like September of this year. It was all I could do. So it rests on my, like near my windshield, but I don't hang it up unless I'm with her. We were stopping and we stopped at the Belk Outlet, which if you get a chance, it's a great outlet store in Russellville, Arkansas. And she said, there's a handicap spot. And I was like, whoa. So I put the handicap sticker like on by the mirror and I was like, Mom, I feel so ashamed. She's like, no, you shouldn't. I said, but I am very able-bodied. And she said, well, it's for me. But from that perspective, I was thinking, what are people thinking of me? So I tried to walk really slow into the outlet. Yeah. It was like, I wanted to say, it's not for me, it's for my mom. I was looking at that today and I thought if someone saw me parking and you were in this class, you'd be like, and you knew what my car was, you'd be like, does she need a handicapped? She does not, except when her mom is in tow.
but it made me very self-conscious. Yeah. Okay. All right. We are now going to watch a short video on social psychology, what it is. And I have oodles of
tabs open here.
What is social psychology? Social psychology is, I think, the most interesting subfield of psychology. It is the scientific study of how individuals' thoughts, feelings, and behavior are shaped by the actual, implied, or imagined presence of others. So let me unpack that. We're interested, as a social psychologist, in how people's thoughts about things and what they're feeling and how they're acting are shaped by other people. Those other people don't have to be in the room with you. You can be imagining them. You can be sort of they're there by implication. For example, when you get up in the morning and you put on deodorant and you put on makeup, there's not another person probably in the room with you, but you're thinking about other people and your behavior, you're doing that. The clothes you pick out are shaped by other people. So social psychology is that domain of psychology that studies how we are affected by the social situation and other people. I would say there's two primary ones that most social psychologists would point to. And the first is the power of the situation. So what social psychology shows us more than any other field in psychology is just how powerful the social context is in affecting how we act and how we think and how we feel. So the second big idea in social psychology is that our behavior is shaped by our subjective construal of situations. Two people can look at the exact same thing and see different things, react to it in very different ways. So what we bring to a situation affects how we filter what we see. There's not necessarily a readout from the environment to our brains, but rather it goes through a filter. It's filtered by our personality, our experiences, our expectations. So what does that mean? It means that social psychologists follow the scientific method. We have theories, we have hypotheses, we test those hypotheses by collecting empirical data, and we do statistical analyses to see whether the effects that we get look like they are in fact robust or whether they're not. There's a couple different methods. Well, there's actually multiple methods that people use, but the two primary approaches that people take to studying social psychology are correlational and experimental. So correlations basically ask what are the natural associations between two variables. For example, what is the association between age and political views? And it turns out that as we age, people become more conservative. So there's a positive association between those two things. Or, for example, similarity of attitudes and liking. People tend to like people who are more similar to them. Or we become more similar to people that we like. So a correlation tells us the natural association, but it won't tell us whether liking is causing similarity or whether similarity is causing liking, and that's where the experimental method comes in. So the experimental method basically involves randomly assigning people to different conditions in an experiment, controlling as much as you can for random things that might affect the findings in your study, manipulating an independent variable, and measuring a dependent variable. So where do I see the future of social psychology? Well, one of the things that I think is so great about this particular field of psychology is how relevant it is to so many different domains of life. So social psychology, in a sense, reinvents itself in new domains. So we have organizational psychology that draws heavily on social psychology. We have political psychology that draws on social psychology. The field of communication draws on social psychology. We have environmental. The list goes on and on and on. The point I'm trying to make is that social psychology is a foundational discipline about how people's behavior and thoughts and feelings are shaped by other people. That is central to the human condition. So I think social psychology is alive and well, and it's increasingly relevant for today's world. So I think it has a robust future ahead.
That was a good short explanation of the gist of what social psychology is. I want you to think for a moment, and you can jot some items down or just keep them in your mind. What behaviors, ways of thinking are influenced by society?
In other words, what societal influences are at work when it comes to you as a human being? I want you to think about that and write a couple of things down or keep those in your brain. Okay, would a few of you be willing to share some thoughts? Yes,
Kind of like I said on the video, kind of thinking about what you're going to wear, what people are going to think of you.
Based on what you wear? Yeah, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. That's a big one. So we're thinking about how we appear to the world. And based on the social situation, you may feel you have more leeway to basically dress the way maybe that expresses your individuality, or maybe not so much. So the way you interpret the social setting is relevant as well. That's a great example. Thank you. Something else? Jasmine? You have nothing to offer?
I said parenting style.
It's a big influencer, right? Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, like if you look at different time periods, parenting styles was a lot different like 20 years ago compared to
Yes,
today.
uh-huh.
And I think that has a lot to do with people's reactions on like social medias, and also like things just coming to light that people used to be secretive about, stuff like that. I don't know a better way to explain it.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. Well, like mental health used to be something you didn't talk about.
Yeah.
Especially if you go back to the generation, like my mom is a baby boomer, like people were taking all sorts of pills during that time, but no one was talking about it.
Yeah.
And like her mom and that generation, a lot of the ways that they cope were through, taking Valium, and that was very common. So, and then but you didn't talk about any of that, right? And so that's been one thing that's been great, I think, for the most part, you're in the same generation here. Your generation really opening up that dialogue, and you're opening it up due to probably your parents wanting perhaps you to be more open with them, right? Yeah, good example. Others?
I feel like as human beings, like everything in our lives is influenced by society to some extent. Like she was talking about like our parents influence us on, you know, like how we react to certain things, how we grow up. Our friend groups do, school does, whether or not like we grow up around religion, where we are like in the world, like certain people are gonna have different norms and societal expectations depending on where they live.
A literal place in the world, right?
Yeah.
And then also like figurative place in the world.
Time period, like you were saying, like there's different norms like 30 years ago versus now. It just, everything changes and shifts.
Sure. Let's say you had a debutante in the 1860s who was going out and this was like her societal debut, all right? None of what we're wearing would be considered socially acceptable for that group of people, right? So what might she look like in the 1860s? Fluffy and frilly, probably, right? Is that a good way to describe it? Today, that would be if someone turned up like that in class, what might you do?
I would assume they're in a play.
You would assume they're in a play, okay? You would assume they're an actor, all right? Okay. Others, would any of you be like weird?
Let's be like, oh, she has
Like-
plans today.
She had what?
She has plans today.
She has major plans today. Yes, her societal debut is tonight. Anyway, we all have thoughts that would go with that, right? Okay. Let's go back to appearance. Appearance changes as a function of society and what we wear is like. I was reading something recently, I really like clothing, but about how style of clothing has changed over time in the business world. Take it back to the 80s and there was this power suit, and oftentimes not just like a tie and slacks and a jacket, but maybe even like a vest, right? And that's how you dressed. And that sort of defined your image. And there was not much wiggle room. People would there'd be issues if a woman came into the workplace without wearing pantyhose. Right? Today that can be a fashion option, and I hear in some places it's coming back a little, but it's definitely not a prerequisite, right, to being accepted in most workplaces. And then you talk about just the impact of the way parents parent you, right? In my house, from a young age, it was really instilled in me the importance of the way you talk, like the way sounds are coming out of your mouth, like to have appropriate diction and to have a vocabulary, and then also how you present yourself in your posture and in what you wear. That was for better or worse, yeah, as we all go, for better or worse, that was something that was really instilled in me, right? And that trickles down to messages that my parents maybe would have received, whether those were messages from their parents or from society. Right? Anything else you can think of? So you say almost everything. Social media is huge, right? Yes.
Social media and like pressure to like fit in with everybody.
But into a certain group within social media, right? So certain groups, you make this decision to be part of this group. The social norms for that group may be very different, right? So ways of fitting in. Okay. This can be really self-limiting, right? Other things having to do with social media.
I mean, this is just kind of like a me personal thing, but like conformity, like I don't want to post anything that may offend somebody, so then it's like my stuff is just very, because it's like, I'm trying to, advertise to everybody. It's just, that social construct of I need people to like me, so I'm not going to do anything that, I may believe is right, but somebody else may not believe.
Right. So that people pleaser in you,
Yeah.
which could be partly society. I mean, I am like a somewhat reformed people pleaser, but for so many years I lived my life that way. It was all what I thought people thought of me and not wanting anyone to be mad and wanting to be, liked by everyone. That was so important to me. And it's taken me, I'm 52 right now, like this number of years to sort of get to the point where I can be okay if people don't like me. And I know there are people, I hope not a ton, but there are definitely people out there who don't like me. And I just think, well,
Shame on them.
well, yeah, no, I try not to say that, you know. Or I would not tell you I would say that. Do you remember the video that I showed you on the Monopoly and the car experiments? Those were both social psychology experiments, correct? Seeing what people would do in a given situation. There have been conformity experiments like the Asch experiment. I don't know if you've heard of that in intro, but people come in, and I may not be explaining this exactly as it originally happened, but they're given a series of lines, and there are people, so the Confederates are the people that are involved in the experiment, right? Like the person walking across the road in the Carwin. And you see these lines, and I mean, they're very like, different in size.
Yeah.
And you have some people who are answering the question. So someone says, maybe the researcher, what line is the shortest? Person A, person B, person C. These are all people who are in on the experiment. Say that line. When they had people just from like the general audience, as it were, do that, a lot of people responded with the same answer everyone else gave, okay? Because we don't like to be wrong in front of other people, correct? Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting, and that's a really good depiction of how we can be swayed by society. All right? So social psychology is a combination of society, what's going on, and then the individual. And I like to say it's the interplay between the individual and society. How you influence people around you, right? Because you do. And how other people influence you. And hopefully when you influence everyone with me, influence people around you, it's something good. One last thing I'll say about the social construction of age. So age, or not age, but ageism. Ageism is something that's socially constructed. And ageism is what?
It can either be like the discrimination or like true like judgment on a person's age, and like their age like solely like defines them.
Good. Not necessarily good, but yes, right, yeah. So any prejudice someone might hold on the basis of age, discrimination, any judgments they have, either that they're voicing or that they're just keeping in their little heads, right, about that. So let's talk about that for just a moment, because that is, the isms are all socially constructed things, right? Let's talk about ageism for just a moment. We talked about what it is. Can you give me some examples, scenarios, or things that come out of people's mouths that are ageist?
Well, I really hate being told that I'm young and naive. Like, I am young, and I do have a lot to learn, but I wouldn't really consider myself naive just because of my age. You know?
Based solely on age?
Yeah.
Good. So ageism can work, we can talk about it, discrimination toward older adults, but we can also talk about discrimination toward younger people, right? So it works both ways. Others?
I think a prevalent one is like older people and like driving, because you hear it all the time.
Okay, so older people and driving, how many of you don't have to raise your hand, but see someone who's much older out on the highway and they're in front of you and you're like, you know, or you go around and you're like, they're old, they shouldn't even be on the road, right? Okay, so maybe you have that feeling, all right? You see it in the skincare industry, multi-billion-dollar industry. She talked earlier about getting ready in the morning and putting on makeup, not so much for herself, but because she felt that that was something that society expected from her. And that's changed a little bit actually within the past 5 or 10 years. I see a lot more people, and I was looking at the acceptance of not wearing makeup in the business world and that, or the workplace, and that's become much more accepted. So that's definitely changed from the 80s when people had the claw bang and, you know, the hair that went like this and like blue eyeshadow and neon, neon everything. Other things that you've heard or seen that are ageist.
I feel like, because my husband does it in my face that he's older than me all the time.
Okay.
Because he's always like, well, I'm older, so I know this.
Older and I know more. Okay. So he's the wise sage, right? I'm the wise sage, and you're never going to be there, right? You're always going to be younger than me. Yeah, that's a prevalent one. Anything else you can think of?
I watch a lot of Survivor.
Okay.
A lot of Survivor, and in the earlier seasons, they wouldn't really.
I think
cast-
earlier, was it best in the earlier seasons or just
yes,
different?
but this season's pretty good. I'm
Okay,
just saying
all right.
you guys should watch. But anyway, they didn't used to cast a lot of older people, and now in the newer seasons, you'll see a few more older people, and it's pretty good. So.
Yeah, and can they kind of hold their own?
Yeah, actually, one of them made it to Final 3 last year. So
Wow,
pretty
I'm
exciting.
inspired. I think that's what I need for some inspiration. Wow, yeah, very cool. So that's sort of starting to change. If we won't have time this class, but maybe next class, I'll have you watch the ageism video. It talks about things just as simple as people saying they have a senior moment, like older people when they lose their car keys. And this person lost them just as much in high school, and they didn't call it a junior moment, right? But all of a sudden, now that they're older, then they look at that as it's because of my age. Another is, I don't know, I like jam, okay? I really like jam, apricot jam, and well, that's really my favorite. I like cherry too, like if the actual cherries are in there. So I buy a lot of jam. Some of those are like really hard, it's hard to open the jam, right? And someone could say, well, you know, that's because someone's frail or old. When really it has more to do with the construction of the jam bottle, right? And ageism is something that if we all live long enough, we're going to be part of it. I mean, we are all old or future old. That's what someone says in the video. And I think that's really true. So just to think about things like that, and a lot of the way the world is structured in terms of maybe discounting that, and on both ends of the spectrum, right? So, okay. I really meandered with that, but it ties into social psychology a lot, and it's, as I grow older, it becomes a more interesting topic for me. Okay. So we're going to talk about social psychology and mesmer. Have you heard the term mesmerizing? If something is mesmerizing, what does that mean?
It's like eye-catching, like.
Eye-catching, yes. Could be like almost trance-inducing. You can't take your eyes off it. Okay. Well, the term mesmerize comes from our friend, or maybe foe, it depends how you look at him, Franz Mesmer. So with that, we are going to begin our discussion. It's interesting, there's not so much talk in this book that talks about his early life. It basically says not a lot is known about his early life. All right, I tried to find a few more things to add in so you had a little bit of knowledge about what early life looked like. But there's not a whole lot out there. So let's see, where am I? There we are. Scrolling down. Okay. Mesmer lived from 1734 to 1815. He was definitely in that age of enlightenment, okay? Lots of interesting things happening, all sorts of theories coming into being, a time of great ingenuity, and with both good and maybe less good ideas. He was born in the village of Isnang. I'm probably bludgeoning that, but he's German. His dad was a master forester, and he went to medical school. He graduated from medical school, and he published his dissertation in which he discussed the influence of the moon and planets on the human body and disease. Boy, that was around really early, right? We think back to Plato and Aristotle and cosmology, the idea of studying the stars to figure out what's going to happen, whether that be like with crops or all sorts of different things, right? So, and a difference between astronomy and astrology, a huge difference, yeah. Okay. Mesmer was a Viennese physician, and he could reportedly cure patients of various ailments through the process of mesmerizing them. So, if you have your book with you, I want you to turn to page 361. I'm going to read a little bit from that. In the fall of 1775, there was someone appointed a commission to investigate the activities of Gassner, Gassner. He was a priest who exercised patients, not like put them on a treadmill, but the other kind, exorcised patients. And he believed that by doing that, he could rid them of evil spirits. Right. He had interesting techniques. After making sure the patient was a Roman Catholic and was participating in the exorcism willingly, he would command demons present in the patient's body to cause symptoms immediately and intensely. If nothing happened, he declared the patient physically ill and sent him to an ordinary doctor. So nothing happens to you when I do this. Go to the traditional MD. But if symptoms did appear, as they often did with the patient convulsing, twitching, or crying out in pain, Gassner concluded that demons were at work and he was going to tame them. And he had a technique for taming the demons in your body. He would command them to move about in the body and produce different symptoms. So like people would start writhing and, be contorting and all sorts of things because this demon was moving around and he was trying to get it to exit the human being. Does that make sense? Maybe it doesn't make sense, but you understand what I'm saying. These suggestions were often effective as paralyses and pains moved about to different parts of the body, accompanied by groans and expressions of extreme emotion. Finally, once Gassner established control of the demons, he would order them to depart from the body altogether. Okay, be gone, you demons. So many of his patients reported improvement, but he created controversy. Can you imagine, right? Although exorcism was an accepted ritual, many churchmen thought Gassner carried it too far and used it too frequently. Not surprisingly, a lot of doctors said, you're really infringing on our territory, okay? Back off. The testimony from this commission, star witness, so he testified, became the first link in a surprising chain of events that led to the scientific study of social influence and suggestibility and the modern discipline of social psychology. So that was if I asked you where the root is, it was with Gassner and working to exorcise demons from people's bodies. Later, we'll talk about the social influence at work and all those things, the social psychology at work with that. Okay. All right. I'm going to show you a video, but before I show you, I just want to talk about the fact that Mesmer had some different forces that he used. He felt he had this animal magnetism sort of charge within his own body, and that he could cure people by being around people. He also could create different magnetic fields and things that would help cure people who were suffering from, especially women who were suffering from hysteria. Okay. big term encompassing I don't know, I feel like anytime something was wrong with a woman, she was hysterical, and that was not a nice thing to say. All right. He made important discoveries also in the phenomenon known as hypnotism, and as a result of what Mesmer did, people became really interested in examining the power of social influence. All right, so without further ado, we're going to watch the phony health craze that inspired hypnotism.
In 1783, human beings left the ground for the first time, lifted in the air by an invisible gas discovered only a few years earlier, hydrogen. Scientific progress in the 18th century in Europe, a period known as the Age of Enlightenment, seemed like magic. Experiments in chemistry and physics were fundamentally altering how humans understood the universe. The world of medicine, on the other hand, was still largely stuck in the past. Painful, often ineffective medical procedures that had persisted for centuries, like leeching and bloodletting, were still in practice. Until a charismatic German physician appeared in Paris in 1778. He claimed to wield magnetic healing powers and that he could cure almost any illness using just his hands. His methods caused a sensation. Even the Queen of France herself, Marie Antoinette, received his treatment.
That's frilly and
It seemed like
lovely.
Anton Mesmer had discovered the key to how disease works in the human body. Or maybe he was making the whole thing up.
Oh, that's infected. Maybe getting a tattoo at a music festival is a bad idea. Lucky for you, an Amazon One medical virtual visit can happen anywhere, even here.
Sorry, everyone. I think there's another one after this, probably.
Tomenti salted caramel truffle layers is truly irresistible. With Argentinian dulce
Social psychology at work. All right.
Franz Anton Mesmer studied medicine at the University of Vienna, and he was fascinated by how natural energies in the universe, like gravity, interacted with the human body. He ultimately developed a theory about the fundamental nature of life he called animal magnetism. Basically, Mesmer theorized that all living things are connected by an invisible magnetic fluid.
It's a bit ambiguous whether it's an actual fluid or more like some sort of force. But essentially, it just pervades the universe. My name is Urte Lokidite, and I'm a PhD student. I'm quite interested in sort of medical history more generally.
According to Mesmer, most diseases were caused by this fluid being blocked somewhere in the body. And the cure for almost anything involved restoring the flow of this fluid by magnetizing the patient.
Hence the medical sort of treatments that he came up with.
Initially, Mesmer had his patients swallow iron filings, which he claimed he could guide through the body using magnets.
Quite quickly, though, he discovered that just using his hands was enough and would produce the same effects.
When he approached the French Academy of Sciences and Royal Society of Medicine to seek approval for his theory, he was turned away repeatedly. So he switched tactics and appealed directly to the people of Paris. And they loved it. Mesmer's patients, many of them women, came to him with a range of ailments, both physical and psychological, like melancholia, what's now called depression.
His practice was definitely stupendously popular among the French nobility and the upper classes. He would be invited to court quite a lot, and that was another way that his popularity sort of grew at the time.
As Mesmer's reputation spread, he found ways to expand his practice.
So he not only trained disciples, but also he started having group seances.
Mesmer invented his baquet, a wooden tub that could magnetize groups of people simultaneously. It was filled with what Mesmer claimed was magnetized water, along with other materials like glass bottles and pieces of metal.
And they would have protruding rods that the patient would press against the affected body part.
Or tether the ailing body part to the baquet with rope, like this man who's suffering from a headache is doing.
Having in mind the alternatives that were on offer at the time, taking part in Mesmer's seances was just a great way to spend your time, in addition to kind of trying to heal whatever it is that your complaint is.
People crowded in a dimly lit room while someone nearby played soft music on the glass harmonica.
It paints a picture, right?
And then Mesmer would be wandering around in his lilac coat, touching them in various places, lower abdomen, thighs, which is where the stoppages seem to be located, especially in the women patients.
People responded to magnetization by experiencing what Mesmer called a crisis.
You'd expect crying, shouting, convulsing, hiccups, laughter. Some of the cases that are described involve people biting their hand such that a mark is left. It would be fairly extreme reactions.
One of these group seances is reimagined in the 1994 biographical film Mesmer, which stars Alan Rickman as the enchanting physician himself.
You see before you the conductors of my power. Muscle fluid is flowing.
But not everyone loved what Mesmer was doing. He had already been chased out of Vienna in 1777 after being labeled a fraud and a charlatan for falsely claiming to have cured a young girl of her blindness. And he was starting to get the wrong kind of attention in Paris too, namely within the scientific community.
The conventional sort of doctors were definitely losing a lot of their patients. You also had people actually concerned with the fact that, this magnetic fluid was probably not a thing.
One of those people was the King of France himself, Louis XVI, who in 1784 commissioned a group of leading scientists to investigate Mesmer's methods. The commission was headed up by the first U.S. ambassador to France, Benjamin Franklin, a celebrity scientist himself who had already mastered a different form of energy, electricity. Those crises Mesmer's patients experienced certainly made it seem like his methods were doing something. But the commission wanted to figure out if it was caused by magnetic fluid or something else entirely. The commission came up with one clear way to test this. Strip out all the suggestive elements of Mesmer's practice, the group setting, the glass harmonica, and see if animal magnetism could cause a crisis on its own. Mesmer refused to participate, so the commission worked with his lead disciple, Mesmerist Charles Deslandes, instead. Here he is attempting to magnetize Benjamin Franklin during the proceedings.
I chose Wix for my business because of its massive scope for functionality and freedom of creation.
When Deslandes magnetized a subject while hidden behind a partition, nothing happened at all.
Then he emerges, does exactly the same moves in front of her, she collapses.
Another test involved a woman drinking water she was told was magnetized, but wasn't.
She collapsed quite quickly within, I think, minutes in a full-fledged crisis. And then the commissioners bring her water to recover.
They told her that this was regular water.
She feels much better after drinking that. However, that cup was in fact magnetized.
Their innovative approach became the first prominent placebo-controlled blind trial. Unsurprisingly, the commission concluded that the subjects only reacted to animal magnetism when they expected it. And the true force behind Mesmer's methods was what they labeled imagination. But as it turns out, that conclusion ended up being an innovation itself.
Although the report shattered the notion that it was magnetic fluid that was doing the work, they did acknowledge that something's going on, right? Even if the reason is imagination.
Once the report was made public, Mesmer's reputation was ruined. Animal magnetism became a joke, and Mesmer was once again labeled a fraud and a charlatan. He left Paris in disgrace and died in 1815. But mesmerism lived on, finding a new fan base in the United States through the mid-1800s, until it evolved into something more recognizable today, hypnotism. James Braid, the surgeon who coined the term hypnotism in the 1840s, was fascinated by animal magnetism and wrote extensively about its potential. Like the Franklin Commission, Braid concluded that outside influence wasn't necessary to produce the phenomena of mesmerism. It could come from the mind alone. No magnets necessary. Mesmer's downfall at the hands of the Franklin Commission's report inadvertently ended up being foundational for our understanding of the placebo effect.
There are a couple of different ways you could read it. So one would be the rational scientific approach, or like the scientific method, has triumphed. animal magnetism is completely destroyed as a sham, and that's the end of the story. Another way of reading it would be how powerful psychological suggestion can be.
Some of the takeaways. We know how this began, right? He was influenced by this priest who was conducting exorcisms, and he was determined to show that he could cure people, right? He had a special gift that lived in his hands, right? And what could his hands do?
Basically just like heal people.
Heal people, okay.
Have you heard of that, like throughout time? Sometimes people referring to that, like putting hands on people to heal them. That's something if you study chakras. I don't know if you know much about that. There are people who balance chakras who may actually put hands on you or hover your hands over and encourage the chakra to open up. All right. There are 7 different chakras in the body, and they're each associated with an area of a body, and like the root chakra is associated with an area, the heart chakra is associated with another area, and if those are blocked, then you're unhealthy. So people who balance chakras can do that. They also may do that through the use of different vibrations, which I find really interesting, like different levels of sound that they can vary.
Can you think of anything else like this that maybe what it's doing is it's really doing something, like the procedure is doing something, or maybe in the mind of someone it's doing something? Can you think of any medical procedures or psychological procedures maybe that do that?
I know they've done it in the past with like the idea of placebo effect, where people, if they think they've been healed by a type of medicine, then their minds trick them into thinking they're better, even if they
Yes.
weren't actually given anything.
Yes, and that, some people do get better, like honestly, just through taking the medicine. So the placebo effect, that was something unlikely that was established in looking at Mesmer's, I would say experiments, Mesmer's findings. Anything else you can think about?
This is kind of a weird thing. I can't remember if I learned it last semester in class or if it was like
Yeah.
a TV thing, but it was like people when they have a sensation of ghost pains, won't they like do like the mirror and then like an arm to where it's like they feel like their arm's physically there.
Yes.
So that they don't have like that pain sensation of it being gone. So it's like tricking the mind to.
Yeah. So people who have lost a body part to something like that, and they're having pain in that area, to be able to do that to show them that's going on. Anything else? I would take something like breathing exercises, because if you don't know a lot about it, you might be like, okay, I did the breathing exercises and I feel better, right? There is, though, in that case, a lot of scientific evidence to suggest that breathing exercises can be done to help stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest. So let's do this for just a moment. We're going to inhale for 4 counts. We're going to hold for 5 and exhale for 7. So you're going to inhale, hold for 5, and exhale like you're blowing out a candle for 7. All right. So if I did this and I didn't know any of the scientific claims, I may or not feel like this is helping me. But if someone I really respect says this will help me, it's more likely I'm going to believe it, right? Whether I know the science or not. So here we go. Inhale. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale. This time I'm going to do it the way I told you, 4, 5, and 7. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Again, inhale. Hold. Exhale. So any breathing you do where the exhalation is longer than the inhalation is going to activate the parasympathetic, your rest or digest system. So that's really good if you need to relax, like before a test, all right? Anytime where you have quick inhalations followed by little to no exhalation is going to energize the body, meaning it's working on the sympathetic nervous system, which is like our fight or flight. So we're going to do this now. They do this in yoga sometimes. Okay, we're going to do 8 of them. Are you ready? Take a deep, make sure you have the air. Here we go. Do you feel a little bit of energizing going on there? Yeah, maybe dizzy. Yeah, try it one more time. 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. So 2 techniques that we have been found actually do work, right? So some of this stuff, there's logic and there's science behind it. Some of it is more just the power of suggestion. Okay. I want to talk just a little bit more about Mesmer. I would like for you to carefully read page 362 through 367 by class time on Thursday. Mesmer, so he was sort of a interesting rogue character from the get-go. He plagiarized a lot of his dissertation, all right, but people didn't really, it went undetected in his lifetime. So nothing happened there. After graduation, he married into wealth. He married a wealthy widow and became an active socialite. He was an amateur musician who befriended Mozart. Pretty big stuff, right? So he was in these really elite social circles at the time. Benjamin Franklin, remember, was on the commission to debunk Mesmer's claims, but he had also invented the glass harmonica. So there are all these odd things kind of going. I mean, if we look at it, there's some interesting stuff going on. So we have Franklin doing his electricity thing, doing his political thing, and also inventing a glass harmonica. All right. It was a musical instrument played by rubbing damp fingers against a rotating glass drum. Mesmer got one and became a virtuoso. And Mozart later wrote a concerto just for Mesmer on the glass harmonica. All right. Mesmer practiced medicine only sporadically, but kept up with current scientific developments. In 1773, he began to treat a young relative of his wife's who suffered from periodic attacks that were basically attacks of hysteria, or maybe we could even think of it as vastations. Okay. He had the patient swallow something, which in the video they said was iron filings. Okay, danger, danger. So this was his first foray into it. After having his patients swallow a medicine containing iron, he applied specifically designed magnets to various parts of her body. Soon, she said she felt a force flowing within her. Entered a crisis state with twitchings, convulsing at all these areas, right? Her problem areas. When the crisis subsided, her symptoms disappeared for 6 hours. Mesmer repeated the treatment several times until the cure seemed complete and permanent. Mozart had seen her at her sickest, and 6 years later, this is what they said. On my honor, I hardly recognized her because she was really emaciated. He said this in an admiring way. She is so large and fat. She is married and has 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. But that was the recovery, right? And that, social times have changed where we look at bodies in different ways based on sort of the time period we're in. All right, so he decides to do this with different patients, but then determines that Magnetism doesn't have anything to do with his cures. It's what's inside him. It's his animal magnetism. So he starts to do this and starts supposedly healing, or at least people felt like they were being healed. Okay. Later, he established these baquets, which were those big tubs you saw, right? And what was the tubs had, like, they had water in it, right? And glass bottles, and what else? Probably some iron filings. Yeah, like just different things that would make things maybe go zzz, right? And then there was a rod. And what did the patient do in terms of the rod? If your hand was the issue, you would place your hand on the rod, right? If your head was the issue, what did you need to do?
To your head.
Someone would tether your head to the rod, okay? And then you would sit for a certain amount of time. And was this done in the individual setting? No. So we can think about it setting the scene with, we have this wealthy socialite Mesmer, who also is a doctor who plagiarized his dissertation and fell in with the likes of Mozart and Franklin. So he has all of these wealthy people he can do this to, right? So they're around the baquet, and this is when the idea, like, maybe there's something to this social thing, that they're showing relief of their symptoms in this social environment. So that was something, again, from that experiment that we learned about the power of social suggestion and the power, if these people are doing things, then I need to do this thing too, and it must be working, right? So that's how we jump there. I'm going to take a pause right now, and I'm going to break you up into two groups. And for the rest of class, I want you to think about a social psychology experiment you could do in this classroom. Okay, so you're going to devise a short social psychology experiment. And I'm going to split the room in a way that seems kind of logical. 4 people here and 4 people here, okay? All right. So today you're just getting an idea of the social experiment. Okay. And if you can come up with something that you don't find on the internet, that would be fantastic. Darn it.
4 more minutes, everyone, then you're going to whisper your experiment into my ear. Okay, all right. All right, it looks like you have your idea. I'm just looking at social cues. Can I maybe hear it very quietly? Okay. No.
Oh, it's a really good video. I'll email you send it. Yeah, I know. It's a really good video.
Okay.
So we kind of based on that, but like we're not strangers, so we thought we would do it like personalities, like everybody would give a partner, and like let's say we were partners, I would describe what I thought, like what she liked to do, or like what
I like that, yeah.
And then she would do it what she actually is interested in, like kind of compare it.
I like that. Yeah, and and you kind of know who people know in class already, so you make sure that that wasn't. Yeah, I like that idea. Good. Anything else on that? Okay. So just type that out right now and email it to me so I have it. And then we're going to do this toward the last part of class on Thursday. Okay, all right. And then I'm going to try it with one of my classes too, after you guys do it here. Okay. Why are you laughing?
Or two different people show you that.
Yeah. What we would like, so you have stereotypes.
Stereotypes, and it's going to be like he's actually the doctor versus stereotypically look like a doctor, but actually he has tax fraud, tax evasion, and all this other stuff. So it's going to be based on like how you perceive what you think and like perception.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I like that too. Maybe you could kind of combine that. And then with it, you may want not every time for it to match. Sometimes you might want the stereotypes to match, but then other times not. I kind of like throwing that in so you could get an array. So maybe that's part one. And then I really like that other idea too. So, okay, type it up for me, email it to me, and then, yeah, we're going to do this toward the end of class. And then I'm going to try it with one of my classes and report back too. So that'll be fun.